The Real AI Podcast with Michael Hainsworth is brought to you by Microsoft.
The value of artificial intelligence and machine learning to the financial services sector has been well documented. Combining disparate data sets from across an organization leads to insights previously hidden behind a mountain of bits and bytes. But when the country's biggest insurance company amalgamated 5,000 servers running 300 separate algorithms across 12 regions worldwide to the cloud, you learn something unexpected. I sat down with Manulife's Global Analytics Officer, Jodie Wallis, and the GM of Microsoft Azure Canada, Henrik Gütle, to discover real AI in the cloud has benefits beyond cost savings. What is a Global Chief Analytics Officer, and do any of your friends have a clue what you do?
That's a good question. I'm leading Manulife's global effort to use data and analytics to help us achieve our goal of becoming the most customer-centric digital leader in our industry. My team and I believe that machine learning and other AI technologies allow us to provide incremental value to the organization over and above traditional statistical techniques or even automation.
It's said that Manulife is in the business of predicting the future. How did you predict it in the past?
Well, we've been predicting the future for many decades. I would say we've been doing it using traditional analytic techniques. One example is linear regression, where we pick data points from the past and then model those data points into the future. The question, though, now is, what are the areas and how can we use modern techniques like machine learning to predict what might happen in the future in a much more accurate way? And so we're looking at not only techniques, but also at alternative data sources. What other data sources can we bring in the mix so that these predictions are better and help us make better decisions?
What kinds of data sources?
Well, we've traditionally looked at very linear data sources. So if we're trying to predict what claims will come in, we look at claims. Now we're looking at all sorts of behavioral data, the way that our customers move about our website and use our services, the way that our customers engage with our agents. So really looking at all sorts of adjacent data to the actual transaction data itself that helps us get a lot more accurate.
I could imagine there's so much more data you can work with that the techniques of the past simply wouldn't work. Eventually, things would get bogged down.
I don't think they'd get bogged down. I think the question is, where can we get that edge on accuracy? Where can we get that edge on precision? And that's kind of the goal when using machine learning, right? We've made good predictions in the past. We've operated effectively. The question is, where can we get that edge and make better predictions, more accurate predictions, and therefore make better decisions about how to help our customers live better lives.
So how does the past help predict the future?
Well, we look for patterns in data. So we're looking for experiences, not just mine or yours, but many, many experiences across many people. And we're looking for, how do those experiences differ and how are those experiences the same? And based on that, we're able to determine what is likely to happen next.
So then what is it about artificial intelligence that makes it perfect for modeling what-if scenarios?
Yeah, it's the learning aspect. So there are many ways that artificial intelligence models learn. We've all heard of supervised learning versus unsupervised learning. There's reinforcement learning. And so it's different techniques to allow the models to learn from historical data, but also from trial and error. And so it involves a lot of training, just like we would train if we were learning. It involves a lot of training of the models to look at different scenarios from the past, look at different scenarios in terms of trial and error, or what you call what if, and determine what the best course of action is.
I'm absolutely fascinated by how you turn this giant ship that is the biggest insurance company in the country around. You consolidated the data silos, 5,000 cores, 300 algorithms. Can you quantify the ultimate benefit?
Well, the ultimate benefit is really measured in speed to value. We have extremely talented data scientists. We have extremely talented business people who are clamoring to apply artificial intelligence to their specific business problems or business objectives. And so it's really giving those data scientists and those business people the tools to get these models built, get them trained, get them tested and validated and into market so that we can take advantage of these great technologies. And we need the enhanced cloud capabilities in order to do that.
So then what are some of those tough lessons about migrating a massive organization to a cloud-based machine learning system are?
Yeah, the biggest lesson for me is just migrating doesn't mean we're actually taking advantage of cloud. So being on the cloud is not the same as taking advantage of cloud. We need to change the way we work. We need to change our processes. We need to change the way we fund projects and evaluate projects. And that needs to be done across 30,000 people and many thousands of processes. And so it is, it takes time. It takes time, it takes patience, and it takes a concerted effort on the people change management activities that are so important.
And at the end of the day, it all comes down to ROI, that return on investment. How much value has AI added to Manulife since starting down this road in late 2016?
Yeah, so since 2018, since we've been calculating the value enabled from analytics, we have delivered millions of dollars of value to the organization, plus a number of intangible benefits on top of that.
I had read that it was a 40% decline in hardware and labor costs over 3 years. That's a remarkable figure.
It is remarkable, and it's taken the efforts of a lot of people and our partners at Microsoft to get there, but we have a long way to continue down this path.
And when you talk about the dollar value that's generated, the benefit of that, whatever it may be, whether it's $1 or $1 billion, where does that value come from?
It comes from all aspects of our business. So a great example is where we're helping advisors be much more targeted in what they offer to their customers and what products and services are in the best interest of those customers. So that would be one example. Another example is from reducing fraud. So reducing fraud helps everybody. It allows us to keep our premiums down and keep our service levels up. You know, at Manulife, our mission is really to make decisions easier and lives better. And so there's great value in better health outcomes for our customers. We're also using AI to help understand which customers are likely to encounter health issues or well-being issues so that we can help them avoid those. And if they do encounter health issues, helping them identify the right interventions to get them back to work or back on their feet as quickly as possible.
So the benefit to Manulife is the reduced payouts that would be necessary if there were health incidents, and the advantage to the customer is that they're healthier.
They're living better lives, exactly.
So what were the unexpected benefits to migrating to the cloud?
It's interesting because we didn't realize, you know, when you think about cloud, you think about it as a technology. We didn't realize the impact it would have on the way we collaborate. And so one of the best unexpected benefits is the collaboration is so much easier. We have people working in over 12 markets around the world. We have people in different departments. We have business partners. We have technology partners. We have data partners. And the ability to collaborate has really been one of those great surprises.
In the meantime, when it comes to the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence systems, we have to keep in mind that correlation is not causation. How do we prevent mistaken connections?
Well, first, we hire the best people. We hire very talented data scientists with PhDs in computer science and statistics, and they know very well how to distinguish between correlation and causation. The second thing we do is we do really excellent model design, where we're thinking about this very problem at the beginning of model design, so it's not an afterthought. And then finally, we have a very robust peer review program.
That review component is critical. A lot of people might think that artificial intelligence and machine learning systems, they're just a black box you plug in somewhere and it spits out an answer like a magic 8-ball.
Right. I mean, peer review is one part of our process that addresses what you're talking about. I mean, the black box issue is a very important one. There are certain areas of AI and machine learning where we need transparency. We need to understand at least explainability. We need to understand how the machine made the decisions it did. And so we're very specific about designing solutions that allow us to have that explainability when it's really important. We also have, in addition to a peer review program, a very robust model risk management program. So we're looking at the materiality of potential risks of these models to our customers' lives, to our operations, to our reputation. And we're making sure that we put these models through their paces in terms of validating that the outcomes we get are the outcomes we expect.
What a long, strange trip it must have been for the company. The adding machine was invented 1 year after the founding of Manufacturers Life Insurance. Is it fair to say artificial intelligence is the most powerful tool your company has had in its 134-year history?
Well, Michael, you're asking somebody who is the global chief analytics officer, so it'd be very difficult for me to say no. I would have to say yes. I mean, it's up there amongst a whole bunch of very powerful technologies. I think the web was a very powerful technology in how it changed, our lives at Manulife and the lives of our customers. But for me, AI is the biggest game changer.
And what does it look like 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road?
I just read an article recently that talked about the fact that in 10 years, data scientists will be a thing of the past because the skills that we call data science today will be so deeply embedded in everybody who comes out of school and starts in the workforce that you won't need dedicated data scientists. I don't think we'll be quite there, but at Manulife, we have a goal of upskilling many of our colleagues outside of advanced analytics, outside of the AI group, because there are techniques that are becoming more and more readily usable and available by citizen data scientists, a term coined by Gartner. And we want to make sure that we're helping those folks, those colleagues of ours, get there.
It sort of feels like typing. There was a time when you would just put that on a resume as a skill, but now it's just assumed.
That's a great analogy. Who comes out of high school without knowing how to type? Who will come out of high school without knowing how to build algorithms? I mean, it's a great future.
Exactly.
With this knowledge in hand, I turn to Henrik Gütle, the General Manager of Azure for Microsoft Canada. When Manulife migrated 5,000 cores and 300 algorithms into a single cloud, or let's say any large enterprise breaks down those types of data silos, you've said that context becomes really important. How so?
Well, I think first of all, it's important to note that there is no shortcut when it comes to migrating systems to the cloud. And I hate to burst people's bubble, but every cloud migration has data as its core, and data migration, data consolidation, data cleanup is all part of a journey. And you don't have to do it all at once, but you need to do it properly. And I think the second thing to note that you're not just migrating your systems to the cloud for the sake of migrating. You're doing it because you're part of a broader digital transformation initiative or something like that, which means that the how becomes much more important or much broader than just the technology. There's also a cultural and people element that you need to take into account. So I'd say in general, a little patience goes a long way, and small wins matters. And it's also not something that leaders can outsource. You have to spend the time up front to make sure that you get the right data consolidated and that you get your data cleaned up. So if you're a CFO, you need to be part of the data governance meetings. You need to have your ongoing, in many cases, weekly meetings with your IT department and so forth. So it is ultimately a journey, and making sure that you do your data consolidation properly and your data cleanup properly as you go through that process is super important. But you cannot forget about the cultural and people element on that journey, because it's not just about the technology.
That's a very interesting point. We often focus on the IT crowd as opposed to the corner office. What does that C-suite need to know when it comes to making this major move?
Well, I think you hit it on the head. The first thing they need to know is that it is a major move, and that it will take time, and that it needs to be done properly. As I said, you don't have to do it all at once, but you got to start somewhere, and it needs to be a core priority from the C-suite and down, because it is such a transformative experience that many companies are going through. So leading by example, as I mentioned, if you're the CFO, you need to be part of these data governance meetings. You need to be part of the conversations that are happening inside IT. It truly is a cross-company initiative, and it needs to be treated as such.
And so from the corner office all the way down, it's important to know, going into such a project, that you know what you're going to use the data for, because there are implications around what you want to use it for in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some companies obviously have a lot of data residing across the organization. A lot of it is legacy data over many years, and really being clear on what data is available to you, what data is truly needed for the for the projects that you've prioritized is super important. Again, as I mentioned, you're not going to migrate your entire data estate overnight, but really being clear on what are the high value projects that gives you the biggest business impact, identifying which data sources are ultimately required or tied to that project, and then start with the migration, consolidation, and cleanup of that data, and then build from there ultimately. So the type of data you select based on the project that you're working on becomes super important for the all-up success of your cloud migration journey.
Bias in that historical data is always a concern for any data scientist. So then what are the issues that need to be addressed in 134 years of data to ensure that we avoid that computer industry term garbage in, garbage out?
Oh, yes. And while not every company might have 134 years of data, I think most companies do have a lot of data available to them. And as I said before, there is no shortcuts in this, right? You have to do it properly. And I think the first step is really around identifying which data you even have. Because data lives in many places. It's often siloed on different servers across the organization. Some data might already be on the cloud. Some data resides on people's machines. And with 134 years of data, some data will be analog in the archives. So I think first step is really to get a good sense of what data is available to you and get the right governance in place. I mean, technologies like Azure Purview will actually help you identify data no matter where it resides so that you get that end-to-end view of what you really have. Sometimes people say, if you don't know where your data is, you don't know where your future is. So step one, really get really good governance of the data that you have today. And the second step is what we talked about is now you need to migrate that data to the cloud and ultimately consolidate it. And that's where some really interesting challenges will arise, like a simple example, like labeling. You might have a label in some of your data set called customer ID, and you have the same label in a different data set. Chances are that the two labels sound the same, the underlying data is very differently. So this data consolidation process and data cleanup process becomes really important. And then, as we talked about, it's rarely a big bang. It's usually an iterative process. So you got to go through exactly the same process every time you migrate more and more data for the next project to the cloud. So it's really this multi-step process. No shortcuts. Identify your data first, and then go through the data cleanup and consolidation process to make sure that you actually have a good data foundations to work with for the various projects that you have on the go.
So what you're saying is there are two types of data auditing. There is the auditing that cleans and removes the bias going into the system, and that prevents the garbage inside the equation. But just because we've cleaned it and we've removed that bias, or we feel we've removed that bias at the outset, it's not a magic 8-ball, as I say. Just because it gives you an answer, you don't have to accept it. You have to continuously audit that on the way out as well.
Absolutely. I think when we're talking about AI in general, machine learning in particular, there's this really important thing that people need to understand that it's not a one-off thing. Like, machine learning models need to be continuously retrained. So the whole notion of lifecycle management as it pertains to machine learning models becomes really important. Like, how do you constantly retrain your model, measuring accuracy and continuously to validate and deploy more accurate models as you go through. So machine learning and building machine learning models is on top of the data that you've migrated to the cloud is not a one-off thing, it's an iterative thing, and lifecycle management for these models becomes super important. I think the other thing that is really important not to forget is it's not just about the accuracy of the model. I mean, the ethical element of it, or what we sometimes call responsible machine learning, becomes really, really important, right? Your ability to get visibility into your model, to explain your models, and ultimately to mitigate some of the unfairness or bias that can occur in these models. And I think that's why it's so important to use platforms like Azure Machine Learning, which provides you with some of these built-in tools to really help you understand and control your models. We provide features for model interpretability, which really helps you identify the features that have the most impact on your model predictions. And then you can run what-if analysis on these features and really see how it changes your model. We have features in for fairness check, which basically provides you a view into potential biases in your models and gives you an ability to mitigate some of that bias and balance between fairness and accuracy. So I think all that to say, like machine learning and models you're building on top of the data that you migrated to the cloud, it is an iterative process, and you constantly gotta focus on improving the predictability and the accuracy of the models, while at the same time keeping responsible responsible machine learning practices in mind.
Any insurance company is focused on what-if scenarios. It's how they make their money. It's how they protect both the customer and themselves. So what is it about artificial intelligence that makes it perfect for modeling those what-if scenarios?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. If you look at more what-if scenarios and computing what-if scenarios in the traditional sense, it very quickly leads to a large number of outcomes, a large number of different permutations of your models, and ultimately you need to recalculate it every single time you want to run the analysis. So it's very compute intensive, and as a result, you often end up analyzing only a few discrete examples, and the probability of those scenarios or those scenarios based on the input you're providing them, which also means you need a high level set of skills and expertise to actually run these analysis, and you're basically limiting the value of those analysis to a few people inside the organization who actually have the skills and capabilities to do it. If you then look on machine learning, on the other hand, you do have an ability to analyze a broader continuum of scenarios, and while you still need the skills and the expertise and the compute powers to build and train the models in the first place, once they've trained, you can share the models with the business users in the organization, and then it's actually quite quick and compute intensive to run what if scenarios on the models that you've created. So you're really moving away from a scenario where everyone needs to be an expert to a scenario where the people who build the models need to be an expert, and the people who use the models can actually gain value from them much more rapidly than they would have in the traditional sense.
When a large enterprise amalgamates and migrates to the cloud, as Manulife has done, how do we quantify the cost savings? How do we quantify success?
Oh, that's an excellent question, because I think for years there's always been this notion of that migrating to the cloud, cost reduction is one of the main drivers, and I still think it's a main success metric for many companies. Like, you look at the reduction of your own data center footprint and associated costs. You can look at things like shifting from capex to opex. You look at some of the only pay what you really use in the cloud and so forth. So I still think like cost savings is always an important element in the business case for migrating to the cloud. But I'm also seeing a shift. I'm seeing a shift of customers, no longer just looking at the cost saving piece, but also looking at some of the business value that the cloud can unlock. I'm thinking of things like, improved security and compliance. Sustainability is starting to become a really big thing. And last but not least, in a world where every company, especially insurance companies, are becoming software companies at their core, the ability to innovate quickly, the ability to put new products and new services in markets rapidly is starting to get much higher value in these business case conversations than the pure cost saving piece of it. And I think like the discussion we had around the machine learning models, it's not just a moment in time, it's an ongoing thing. And I'm starting to see a really good shift from not just building technical roadmaps to migration to the cloud, but also building financial and business value roadmaps, being really clear on what is the value that we expect out of our investments at what point in time, and then having an ongoing check-in with all the key stakeholders and whether we're achieving those objectives. So yes, cost saving is definitely still a big part of the business case, but I am seeing a shift towards trying to quantify and capture some of the business value that the cloud can ultimately unlock to a greater extent than what I've seen before. That's
fascinating. It sounds like it's an evolution of thinking about artificial intelligence as a tool generally.
Oh, absolutely. I think the whole notion of artificial intelligence as a tool and the technology advancements and how exciting that is definitely one side of the story. But what it can lead to for a company and how it can help companies digitally transform and ultimately change business processes and shift work around is a super compelling part of the story as well. I think one of my favorite examples is actually Microsoft itself as a company and some of the transformation we went through on the finance side. Like we came from a world where a lot of our finance department was doing backwards looking work, trying to analyze what has happened and moving towards a more predictive work and ultimately looking at what the future will bring. And forecasting has always been a prime example, I think, in this. We used to have probably 1,000 people working on forecasting, and we leveraging machine learning and having our entire data estate migrated to the cloud. We moved towards a more predictive model where we picked a single data scientist supported by a range of subject matter experts who ultimately built forecasting models for us. And not only did we double our forecasting accuracy, we also cut down our forecasting amount of time from 3 weeks to 30 minutes. So, just one story on the impact that AI and machine learning can have on not just the technology side of things, but really the entire enterprise and a lot of the core business processes that we've all taken for granted. I still remember when we told our salespeople that we would no longer have to do forecasting and that we had a machine learning model that was much more accurate. It was standing ovations because there was obviously also a big time crunch on our sales force having to manage the forecast. So I do think, as exciting as AI is from a technology perspective, the business impact, the culture, and the people impact of it is extremely profound.
Well, companies big and small are migrating to the cloud for everything from software as a service to infrastructure as a service. What does that future mean for enterprise?
Ultimately, the cloud brings tremendous opportunity for solving some of those challenges and opportunities that companies face today. And I think what we've seen over the last year and so it's probably accelerated some of these challenges and opportunities even further. Like the whole ability to being much more agile and being able to react to both internal and external changes is something that ultimately only the cloud can provide for companies. Increase in security and compliance, like we talked about, and then ultimately this notion of having a platform for innovation. Because I think it's really important that people often say that data is a key asset to the company, but I'm personally having a really hard time imagining how can you drive value from data if that data is not stored in the cloud, if that data is stored in dispersed systems all over the place, and in some cases even analog. So it's really around how the cloud can help Canadian companies realize value from everything across how to provide better customer service, how to be more innovative, how to be more efficient, but really harnessing the power of the data that they already have. And I think once you've gone through that process, that then opens up a whole new range of future opportunities, like really going through all your business processes and ultimately reimagining them. I think very often we run processes because we've always run them a certain way in the history. That doesn't mean that the process needs to run that way in the future. I think a lot of the processes we have in a company can be automated. Like ordering office equipment in many companies is a very tedious process. There's nothing stopping you from totally rethinking that process, automating a lot of it, and ultimately improve everyone's work experience. So I do think that the cloud becomes very foundational to a lot of companies, both small and large, and it really becomes the starting point for rethinking what the business of the future will look like.
So I did a little bit of research, and it turns out that the adding machine was invented 1 year after the founding of Manufacturers Life Insurance. I would argue artificial intelligence is the most powerful tool for business in the last 134 years. What do you say?
Wow, well, I learned something new. I did not know that the adding machine was invented a year after Manulife's founding. So that's a really interesting piece of information. And I think you're right. AI is definitely one of the most powerful tools for businesses today. It is a very defining technology of our time, because I think on one hand it helps take over some of those mundane manual tasks that we've traditionally had to do, but I also think it really can help amplify human ingenuity. And we often say that people are a company's most important assets, and if people are the company's most important assets, then it's the human ingenuity that really sets companies apart. So I do think that AI is a very defining technology of our time, and will dramatically help companies redefine who they are and what they're going to do in the future.
That was Henrik Gütle, the GM of Microsoft Azure in Canada, alongside Jodie Wallis, the Global Analytics Officer at Manulife. It was fascinating to learn that companies are seeing the light on real AI as more than just a way to cut costs. In addition to the benefits of improved client health and welfare, Manulife learned that a move to the cloud improved the collaboration between 12 regions around the world, and that by breaking down the cultural silos within the organization, new insights into its future were unlocked. I'm Michael Hainsworth. Thanks for joining us.
You've been listening to the Real AI Podcast with Michael Hainsworth. Subscribe today and visit Microsoft.com/AI to see exciting real-world examples of real AI in use today.